Vladislav.
Hello, Zach. How are you?
Right, long time no speak. In the meantime, you've announced today quite a breakthrough announcement as far as leukemia is concerned. Just could run us through that if you can, please.
Yes. As you might know, our company is developing a new way to treat, to condition, to prepare the patients for the bone marrow transplant. So to prepare a patient for a bone marrow transplant, we are developing a new type of bispecific antibodies that are redirecting immune cells of the patient, T cells, to attack and eliminate unwanted cells. So to prepare a patient for a bone marrow transplant, we need to eliminate blood stem cells from the bone marrow of that patient. So while working on developing these antibodies to condition the patients for the bone marrow transplant, we figured out that the same type of antibodies can be used to treat a subset of leukemia. And this subset of leukemia is acute myeloid leukemia. So we announced this that the same antibodies can be used to treat acute myeloid leukemia or AML. I think in February last year. So while developing these antibodies for the treatment of acute myeloid leukemia, we also figured out that the same type of antibodies could be used to treat a subset of acute lymphoblastic leukemia or ALL. And this is what we announced today, and this is what makes us very excited about this new product candidate.
So, effectively, your research has widened the scope of the treatment that could be delivered.
Yes, absolutely. So, as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, first we started with conditioning of the patients for the bone marrow transplant. Then we went into expanding into the treatment of AML, acute myeloid leukemia, refractory and relapsed AML. And now we're expanding potential use of this product candidate for the treatment of patients suffering from a subset of acute lymphoblastic leukemia or ALL.
I mean, the interesting part here is that the ALL is the prognosis is bad for older patients, so the 60 years plus patients, and this is where your treatment with the survival rates only around 10 to 15% could be quite effective.
Yes, that's correct. ALL has a bimodal distribution in terms of age. So a large portion of newly diagnosed people suffering from ALL are basically kids. And the second peak is observed around 50 years old people. So for those who are 50 and especially for those who are 60, the prognosis is extremely poor. For the 60 years old, the survival rate, 5-year survival rate is only about 10 to 15%. So basically, for people who are 60 years old, we call them older people, although by today's standards they are just middle-aged people. ALL is often a death warrant.
Right. I mean, you've also said in today's RNS that the estimated value of the global therapeutic market for ALL is around $1.5 billion, or it was 3 years ago. Is there any indication at this stage what Hemogenics' share of that could be?
It is very difficult to make this prediction. Only clinical trials will show us how many, what's the percentage of total ALL patients can be successfully treated using this antibody. But I would estimate, based on the age distribution and distribution of subtypes of ALL, that we could probably target somewhere between 20 and 30% of total ALL population.
And clearly, given your breakthrough, you would be at the front of the queue in terms of the market share if it pans out as expected with trials, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, of course. I mean, if the trials are successful, then the adoption is going to be extremely fast.
And what's the? I mean, it may be a rather long question, but what's the time frame on the trials?
Well, it's difficult to say because the first trial for these antibodies is going to be the trial for conditioning of the patients for the bone marrow transplant, and then treatment of relapsed and refractory acute myeloid leukemia. So it depends on the outcome of the phase 1 to a clinical trials for those indications. Will expand or will try to expand into ALL. Ultimately, at this point, we are looking at probably another year before we go into trials.
Right. I mean, maybe a related question as far as your company is concerned. There are plenty of the large pharmaceuticals companies trying to develop new drugs for their pipeline. How do you fit into that space? Are you sort of head to head with them? Does this make you a target? How does that pan out?
Well, we announced, I think, May last year that we started a collaboration with a very large biopharmaceutical company developing these antibodies. So this collaboration is getting the point where it's going to be complete very soon, or it's almost complete. And as we announced, this biopharmaceutical company will have an option to in-license our antibodies. So it depends on what they decide to do with our antibodies. If they decide to license our antibodies, obviously everything will develop extremely fast. And the reason that they collaborate and the reason that they're excited about collaborating with us is basically validation of our merit. So our ideas are good, I think, and they think the same way, and we have a good chance to compete with other large pharmaceutical companies.
Right, and so finally, you've been making these relatively significant breakthroughs with a relatively small company over the last year or two. Do you think the market has really appreciated what you're doing at this stage?
Well, it's a very difficult question. Of course, no. So we are totally underappreciated by the market, in London. And to say that we're a relatively small company is also a huge understatement. We are not just a relatively small company. We are micro company. We have only 5 full-time employees, all of them scientists, including myself. And these people, forget about me, but our scientific team is just making miracles come true. So we have so much in our pipeline and so many collaborations with very big, very significant players that our valuation is laughable.
Vladislav, congratulations. I suppose the main thing is to congratulate you really on the breakthrough in blood cancer. That's the human angle is obviously the most important part of everything, and hopefully people will appreciate that. And thank you very much for speaking with me today.
Thank you.
There we are. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I'll just